Hey, what's up, fight freaks? I'm the Combat Remix, bringing you the MMA fix you so desperately need if you're a diehard fan. Not for those who think a sickle sweep is a virus. I'm pretty sure my clickbait thumbnail pissed some of you off, so let's dive right into my UFC 249 predictions in under 10 minutes. Starting from the bottom, working our way to the top. Ryan Spann versus Sam Alvey. I don't know how much longer Alvey's got in the game, just to be honest. He's been at this for a number of years. He started as low as welterweight, fought the majority of his career at middleweight. Now he's at fighting at light heavyweight. These guys are really big. I don't know if he has the size to compete with them. I understand the weight cut's an issue, but Ryan Spann, he has a number of knockouts. He also seems to have a pretty good guillotine, so I could see him winning by both knockout or submission. He's a tall guy, so I don't know how Sam Alvey is going to be reaching his chin. I mean, he's 6'5" if I'm not mistaken, so I could go with either a knockout or a submission win, but I'm picking Ryan Spann for the win. Bryce Mitchell may be a young up-and-comer and even the favorite to beat Charles Rosa, but I'm a little biased in this bout. I'm a fan of Charles Rosa. Even in fights that he's lost and people just kind of waved him off, he had a really good fighting chance and put up a hell of a fight. He's even submitted fighters who were said to be better grapplers than he was. I may regret this pick, but my heart goes with Rosa to get the win. Next bout is a rematch between Vicente Luque and Nika Price. Now, while I believe Price has probably improved since the loss in their first bout, I don't see what's going to change from their first fight. I believe I would give the durability, the striking skills, and the grappling skills all on the side of Vicente Luque. Anything can happen when you're throwing leather in there and you're swinging wild as Vicente Luque likes to do, but ultimately I think he's either going to catch him in another Darce choke, or more likely than not, he could have even finished the fight with strikes had he just kept pounding away. So he'll probably do the same in this fight. If he doesn't win a decision, he's going to finish this fight via knockout or TKO. Uriah Hall versus Jacare Souza is a pretty interesting fight. Now, this may come as a little harsh, but I believe Uriah Hall, if he's going to win, it has to be by knockout, because he sure isn't going to beat Jacare on the ground. And not to mention, Jacare has knocked out some pretty good fighters. He's pretty good with his hands and feet. He knocked out Derek Brunson twice, once with a head kick. Jacare is going to get at least one takedown, and he's very strong on the ground. So I don't see Uriah Hall doing anything other than a flash knockout similar to what he did against Gegard Mousasi. I'm leaning that Souza will get a submission, but if he doesn't find it within the 3 rounds, he'll definitely win a decision. Michelle Waterson comes into this fight as a slight underdog against Carla Esparza. Now, while you can make an argument that Esparza is probably the more powerful puncher, clearly the more technical striker is obviously Waterson. But in addition to her technical striking skills, she has a pretty good ground game. However, because Esparza is such a strong wrestler, I don't know if playing a grappling game would be a smart idea for Waterson. If she can't thwart the takedown, it's all she's going to have to try to stalemate the position, but obviously on the feet, I think she's going to be able to do a little more, just like she was against Karolina Kowalkiewicz. And despite her pretty brutal defeat against Joanna Jędrzejczyk, I think she has a couple of wins over some pretty strong opponents to suggest that she could at least squeeze out a decision. So I'm going to go with Michelle Waterson, even though she's a slight dog in this fight. Alexei Oleinik versus Fabricio Verdum. This is just a bad matchup for the Russian. Even if you were to make the argument that the fight will be a stalemate on the ground, which I don't believe, I do believe that Verdum would have the advantage on the ground, but you'd also have to give Verdum the striking advantage. He's a really good Muay Thai striker and has a really nice reach, uses his length really well with his kicks, so I don't see any way that Oleinik could win this fight. Unless if it's just a weird Travis Brown situation where he gets him in a half-assed position and it almost seems like Verdum just kind of gives up. But he's been out of fighting for some time. I think he's really wants to get back in there and show what he's made of and kind of get back to his winning ways. Donald Cerrone versus Anthony Pettis is a really difficult fight for me to pick because, in a sense, they have a lot of similarities in the sense that their styles are similar, very kick-heavy. They have a striking background. However, they're both very proficient in submissions and have quite a few under their belt. They also both look like absolute world beaters when they're on their game, but many times they seem like maybe they don't want to be there if a fight isn't going their way. They seem to weather under the pressure, and there's numerous examples for both of them in that regard. Historically, Anthony Pettis has had problems with wrestlers, so I don't think that's really going to play a factor into this fight, although it could, because I would say that Cerrone is definitely a better wrestler than Pettis, not necessarily a better grappler, but that point can certainly be debated. A pretty key difference I'm picking up on these fighters is Anthony Pettis can show up really well in one round, but then let other rounds get away from him as if you didn't even have that particular round to compare it to, you would just say he's completely off his game. Whereas Donald Cerrone, if he doesn't show up, he tends to get finished rather quickly. One could make the argument that Pettis starts off his fights better, however Cerrone certainly finishes his fights better. Things may look extra bad for Donald Cerrone, but in all fairness, he's coming off the losses to Conor McGregor and Tony Ferguson, one man who ends many of his fights rather quickly and has unstoppable power. The other man is probably the only person you could say definitely finishes fights stronger than Donald Cerrone and has better cardio than anybody in the entire UFC. You take those two fights out, and I'm absolutely picking Donald Cerrone. Now, I know the damage he's taken is definitely going to play a factor, but I'm still leaning with a little bit with Cerrone. As long as he doesn't get stopped in the first round, I think he's going to get stronger as the fight goes on. Where Pettis may tend to wither the longer the fight goes. Before I change my mind, I'm picking Cerrone. I'll make this next fight real quick. Greg Hardy over De Castro because he's got the side advantage, the speed advantage, and the power advantage. This one's going to end by knockout, not sure what round. Jeremy Stephens versus Calvin Kattar may be the sleeper for fight of the night. It wasn't too long ago that Stephens was a favorite to beat Jose Aldo, but that was mainly because people thought Aldo was clearly declining. Not that he hasn't, just not nearly to the level they thought. There have been examples where people were underestimating Stephens, like in his fight against Magomed Sharipov. But when you compare Kattar's fight against the same opponent, you can clearly see the technical differences. We're talking about a guy who knocked out Shane Burgos and Ricardo Lamas, who's known for being extremely tough. He even went the distance with Max Holloway in that crazy brawl they had at the end. I think Stephens will put up a heck of a fight, but in the end he's going to fall short. And I don't want to say he's going to lose by knockout because how tough he is, but I actually think that Kattar can do it and put him away. Francis Ngannou versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik. This is your classic technical striker versus power puncher. And that's not to say that Rozenstruik doesn't have power, because of course he does. He knocked out both Alistair Overeem and Andrei Arlovski. But it's just not the type of power that Francis Ngannou holds. This guy is like getting hit by a truck. And on the other side, that's not to say that Francis Ngannou is a bad striker, because clearly he's not. I just don't think he has the credentials that Rozenstruik does. But at the same time, Rozenstruik isn't the elite kickboxer that's just going to pick Francis Ngannou apart. So ultimately, I do think the power puncher is going to get the knockout in this fight. In our co-main event, we see the return of Dominick Cruz trying to regain his bantamweight title against now champion Henry Cejudo. I must admit that I'm rather surprised to see that Henry Cejudo is such a big favorite. In fact, I was quite certain that Dominick Cruz was going to come in as a slight favorite. Now this has me thinking that people aren't taking in particular factors for this fight. People who think Cejudo is going to retain his belt seem to be very overconfident that he's going to get in on the inside and really put his power on Cruz. But to think that Henry Cejudo can do this with relative consistency through this fight is a little bit shocking to me. This has partially been attributed to Cruz's long layoff, but this isn't the first time that's happened, and he's come back in the past like he was completely immune to ring rust. He stated very adamantly he doesn't believe it exists. Now, while it's true this is the first time he's coming back from a defeat, before that he was a dominating and undefeated champion in the UFC. And I certainly don't think anybody can imply that Dominick Cruz's loss to Cody Garbrandt was so demoralizing that he's going to come back and look nothing like his former self. I think that claim is absurd. And round by round, it wasn't as if his loss to Garbrandt was a one-sided fight. Most of the judges, I believe, had that fight 3-2 in favor of Garbrandt, so it certainly wasn't as one-sided as people were making it seem. Now, when you factor in Cruz's head movement, footwork, and MMA wrestling skill, I don't see how you can say that Cejudo is just going to tag Cruz with regularity, considering it took him over 2 rounds to even find Marlon Moraes. Cejudo doesn't need more than an opportunity or two to finish this fight, but I'm still leaning towards Cruz, and I think he's going to win a decision. In our main event, we have Tony Ferguson taking on Justin Gaethje for the interim lightweight belt. Now, because of my clickbait thumbnail, I know some of you may be thinking I have certain opinions, but what I meant by that was everybody keeps talking about the fact that Justin Gaethje may be the most dangerous fighter that Ferguson can face because he really only needs one opportunity to knock you out, as we've seen in his past fights. And this has been strongly emphasized because often people have criticized Tony Ferguson's striking defense. But although there are examples of this being true, I think it's quite understated that Tony Ferguson may be the best fighter to evade further damage while he's trying to regain his equilibrium. He always seems to be very self-aware, and whether he's just simply trying to roll in a particular position or holding onto a leg in some sort of leg lock attempt. The bottom line is, with one exception, in every case where you can criticize Tony Ferguson for taking an unnecessary shot, you can also say, yes, but he recovered wisely, came back, and won the fight. And in many cases, we're talking about fighters who possess a real knockout threat. So while it's true that Gaethje could find Ferguson's chin, I have to go with Ferguson's overall body of work rather than just the simple threat of a crazy knockout artist. I'm picking Tony Ferguson to win by submission. Hey guys, thanks for watching. I hope you liked the video. Leave me your predictions in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe. This is the Combat Remix, bringing you your MMA fix.